How's everybody doing out there? Welcome to another installment of Realtree's Rut Report. We are live again. We are here every Wednesday night, and it's Wednesday night, so we're back. There's a lot to update everybody on this week. Tons of new information, both from myself, from our regional reporters. We've got a lot of new stuff that's coming at you this Wednesday night. So we're super excited to bring all of that to you guys. We apologize again for last week. We had some technical issues last week. Hopefully we don't experience those again this week. I think we got them all worked out. But please drop some comments in the comment section. Let me know if you can see me. Let me know if you can hear me. Hopefully we don't experience any of the issues that we had last week again. I think we had those worked out. Before we jump in, we do want to shout out to Thiessens. They are our Rut Report sponsor, so definitely check those guys out. They are a direct-to-consumer business, so you have to go to their website to check out their products and to purchase their products. This week's product feature highlight, we have two of them. We've got a rain front, storm front, whatever you want to call it, moving through a big part of the country, not all of the country right now, but much of the nation is feeling that if they haven't already. So definitely check out Thiessens rainwear. You can check out the Thiessens V1 whitetail rainwear at their website. The link is in the description. Definitely go give them a look and check those guys out. Super affordable and the quality is phenomenal. Also, with this latest cold front, we have some pretty significant chilly weather that's going to be hitting a lot of the states. Not all, but a lot of the states throughout the weekend and into next week. So definitely check out the Thiessens V1 Whitetail Heavyweight Series as well. With that, we're going to jump into the Southeast report after we check the comments and make sure that we can see and hear. I believe we're good. Good deal. I think we're good. We're going to roll on. So we got some pretty cool stuff tonight. We obviously have our normal rut reporters that's going to be joining from the Southeast. That's me. Northeast, Josh Montgomery. Midwest, Tyler Ridenauer. And then our Western resident, Mr. Patrick Mayteen. Somebody killed a big deer tonight. I'm not going to spoil it for you just yet, but one of our reporters tagged a stud. So stick with us throughout the report to find out who it was and to get the lowdown on what just happened. So with that, we're going to jump into the Southeast, starting in Florida. I know everybody's excited about Florida, but no, in all seriousness, we've probably got some listeners out there who live in Florida and are looking for this information, and that's what this report's about. We are trying to serve as many people as we can. It doesn't matter if you're in the deep south in Florida, or if you're in the Midwest, or if you're up in the Northeast, or if you're in Washington State. We're trying to bring information to everyone. So with that, Florida is going to kick things off. There is a very, very small pocket right in the central part of the peninsula that is seeing some pretty decent rut activity right now, and it's going to continually to spread out right there in the central part of the peninsula. Now, we've also got about a 5-county area on the eastern side of the Florida Panhandle that's starting to ramp up as well. And that rut is going to gradually move westward across the Panhandle as we move deeper into the season and as we move closer to winter. So that's really all we've got for Florida today. But according to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Resources Commission, the hot spots in Florida right now is the central part of the peninsula as well as the eastern side of the Florida Panhandle. That's all we got for Florida. Moving on, we're going to jump over to Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina next. In Georgia, really where the bulk of the rut activity is happening right now is the eastern half, maybe eastern third of the state. Basically, it started in Camden, Glenn, McIntosh, Liberty, Bryan, Chatham. We talked about those several weeks ago. Those are the counties that were kind of the hottest. They were basically, that's where it was happening at. It's kind of slowed down there. There's not a whole lot of rut activity going on down on the coastal area of Georgia now. Most of the rut activity that we're seeing is kind of progressing northwestward. Even the other counties that we talked about later on, probably 2 weeks ago, Effingham, Bryan, Long, Wayne, Pierce, Brantley, Ware, Atkinson, Clinch, Charlton. Starting to slow down there a little bit as well. There's obviously going to be some pockets of remaining rut activity still occurring, but for the most part, it's kind of transitioned into the post-rut there as well. There's probably some pockets within that area, that region, that's still seeing some rut activity though. Most of the rut that's occurring now is basically, again, from Elbert County down to Screven, southwestward to Berrien and Coffee, and then basically back up to the Newton, Walton, Green. That kind of area right there is where the bulk of the rut activity is occurring, the hottest. Now there's reports coming from a lot of other north central, west central, and south central counties as well. But the deep southwestern corner of Georgia and the far northern counties of Georgia, really not seeing a whole lot of rut activity in those areas yet. Still very much pre-rut for those hunters. Moving on to South Carolina. South Carolina is definitely in the thick of it right now. It's basically 95% of the state is seeing rut activity. The coastal counties have already rutted. They didn't, they saw their rut from anywhere from October 1st to November 1st, but with a peak breeding date somewhere around October 15th to 20th. But the rest of the state is really just ramped up. Pretty good amount of chasing activity going on. There's some bucks locked down with does in areas, but it's one of those things where they could be chasing hard on this farm and locked down on another, and then 1 mile to the north, the bulk of the does may not have entered estrus at all yet. So it's one of those things where you just got to be in the woods to know exactly what's happening near you, but just know that a lot of the deer are starting to feel it there in South Carolina, according to South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. Moving over to North Carolina, most of the action is occurring up in the northeastern corner of the state. It's kind of starting to slowly progress toward the central part of the state as well, though. I mean, we've got counties that we're getting reports of rut activity from Moore, Chatham, Caswell, Pearson, Vance, Warren, Halifax, Nash, Edgecombe, Pitt, down to Lanier, Dupin, Sampson, Bladen, Columbus, Robeson, Scotland, Hoke. That basically that circumference that I just mentioned and everything within that area is kind of starting to ramp up now. Basically, it's that eastern half, with the exception of the coastal counties. The eastern half of North Carolina is starting to light up, starting to see some pretty decent activity. The western half of North Carolina doesn't typically see a rut until late November to early December, though. So for now, the eastern North Carolina hunters are seeing the best action. Moving over to Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. In Louisiana, it's the same story it's been since we started this report 5 weeks ago. The southwestern corner of Louisiana, according to Louisiana's deer biologist, that southwestern corner of Louisiana, from DeSoto and Natchitoches parishes down all the way to the Cameron Parish, over to St. Mary Parish, that general vicinity of Louisiana, according to both their historical rut data and current rut data, that's where it's happening in Louisiana. There's little pockets within that region that still haven't seen a rut and won't see a rut until late November to early December, but the bulk of that area, it's probably a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about a 12 to 13 county area, seeing pretty decent rut activity there in Louisiana. So moving on, parish, to Arkansas. Arkansas is kind of a mixed bag. Part of Arkansas sees that traditional November rut that the rest of the northern states see, but then there's also some counties there in Arkansas that do not. They see a later rut that comes the end of November to early to even mid-December. But right now, the hottest counties, according to the Arkansas Fish and Wildlife Resources, they are seeing the best rut action in Washington, Madison, Searcy, Randolph, Izard, Independence, Craighead, Claiborne, Van Buren, Pope, Conway, Yale, Logan, Sebastian, Garland, Saline, Hot Spring, Clark, Nevada. They're also starting to see it kind of ramp up in some other northern counties as well as western counties. The eastern half of the state is really the region of that state that doesn't see a rut period from late November to early December. And basically the Mississippi River counties are the latest counties to rut there in Arkansas. It may be as late as December 10th to 15th before you see some action in your neck of the woods there. But that's basically what we're seeing and what we're hearing. Moving over to Mississippi, I spoke with Slade Priest. He says that the bucks are on scrapes and establishing dominance still in basic core areas. Rubs have really increased the past weeks. Acorns and food plots is where you really need to focus right now. Really just watch the cold fronts and treat it like mid-October in the Midwest. That's a great point, great advice. He said cameras are key right now. If you just want to hunt, hit an acorn flat. That's the best place to go this time of year. Mississippi-wise, though, as far as your rut activity goes, there is none. The entire state is still in early season and pre-rut patterns, depending on where you are. If you hunt basically in the southeastern, because the rut progresses diagonally southward and starts up in the northwest corner of Mississippi, and it won't even start there until probably the first week of December. So once it starts there in the northwest corner, sometime around the beginning of December, it'll slowly progress southeastward across the state of Mississippi. And it will be as late as the last week of January to the first week of February before it gets all the way down to the coastal counties. So up in the northwestern half of the state, you might say, you're definitely in pre-rut patterns there. The southeastern half of the state, still really early season, but nonetheless, regardless of where you are in Mississippi, you're focusing on food, focus on bed-to-feed patterns. You're nowhere near the rut. Moving on to our next state. We're basically in the part of the state where the rut action is the hottest now, with the exception of Alabama. Alabama is our lone state where they're, with the exception of Mississippi as well. Mississippi and Alabama are our only two states in the southeast right now that aren't experiencing at least a little bit of rut activity. Alabama, I noticed we had some comments come out there. You're not going to see any kind of rut activity anywhere in Alabama until late November. Not to say that you won't see a buck breed a doe somewhere in the state, in the next couple of weeks, but by and large, the state of Alabama will not see a rut until the last week of November, first week of December, and that's only for probably 6 to 7 county area. Most of the counties in Alabama will not see a rut until January, February. There's very few counties within the state that's going to see much rut activity before we hit the new year. So definitely in Alabama, our reports, though, say that the bucks are starting to make rubs. There's some scrapes starting to hit the landscape there in Alabama. But again, just like Mississippi, you want to focus on those bed-to-feed patterns, focus on acorns, focus on hard mast that you have there that the deer are keying on, focus on soft mast if you have it as well. And if there is any ag, which there's not, Alabama's not an ag-heavy state like you see some of our other states throughout the southeast. There is some ag there that deer can key on. There's a little bit of corn, a little bit of soybeans, but it's not like the rest of the region, especially Kentucky and Tennessee, Arkansas, even parts of South Carolina, North Carolina for that matter. There's just not quite as much ag there. So definitely your neck of the woods is probably going to be acorn flats, just like it is over there in Mississippi. Moving on to the northern third of the southeast region. That's where it's happening the most. Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. It's that first week of November. And to be honest, I was expecting things to really break loose. I hunted our Ohio property over the weekend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I actually watched a good bit of chasing activity going on. Really solid rut action happening there in southern Ohio. Not far, actually, across the Ohio River. But it's just not happening here in Kentucky. Now, I am hearing reports of some people seeing bucks locked down with some estrus does. Even on a couple days before Halloween, I saw a buck with a doe myself. But that was the exception, not the norm. Most does aren't going to be bred until November 10th to 20th with a peak around November 15th. That's just the way it is in this part of the world. you're not going to see much rut activity, breeding activity until then. Now, that said, I would expect a whole lot more rut activity. And when I say rut activity, I mean chasing, I mean bucks bumping does, and not just young ones either. I'm talking mature bucks as well. I have not been seeing a lot of that action, and most of the things people have been telling me here in Kentucky, it just hasn't really broke loose yet. There's a few pockets where it's a little here and a little there, but it's just sparks of rut activity starting to fly in the region, especially within the state. I'm hearing the same thing in Tennessee, and to be honest, this time of year when the rut really breaks loose, you start seeing deer get hit all over the interstates and highways. That hasn't happened yet either. Typically, I start seeing that real significant increase in highway action sometime around November 2nd, 3rd, and it lasts usually until about the 10th, 12th of November, and then it kind of starts to taper off around the middle of November. But it really just hasn't busted loose yet. I'm hoping that people are just having safe drives, and they're just not hitting deer. Hopefully that's the case, and the rut is still breaking loose. But generally, the highway and interstates are good indicators of whether or not that chasing activity has really cut loose yet, and I don't think it has. We have some similar reports from other reporters as well, I think. So in Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, that region, it's just not quite happening yet. I did speak with outdoor writer Gil Lackey, who is a connoisseur of the whitetail woods. He said he hunted yesterday afternoon, only saw 2 does and a fawn quietly feeding right before dark. He hunted this morning and didn't see a deer. It's possible that could mean lockdown when you don't see deer this time of year, but we're not quite there yet. It's not that lockdown phase yet. That lockdown phase isn't going to hit, again, until somewhere between November 10th to 20th, probably somewhere around that November 15th mark. But he says by the amount of activity that he's been seeing, he still doesn't think it's quite broke loose yet. He did say that the number of deer on the highways there are a little bit higher than what they seem to be here. So obviously there's some chasing going on, some decent action occurring, just hasn't really hit that fever pitch just yet, I don't think. Now, in Virginia, same story. There's been decent daylight activity across the board, though. It just hasn't been a lot of rut activity, not a lot of chasing, not a lot of breeding that I have seen. I've hunted the last few afternoons after work, and this afternoon I saw a solid 3.5, 4.5-year-old deer, but he looked at a doe and then went right back to doing what he was doing, had no interest in her. Same thing happened yesterday afternoon. 4.5-year-old buck came out, really didn't act that ruddy. He rubbed a tree, made a scrape. That was it. He didn't really pay attention to the does that were in the area. It's just one of those things where rut activity can be extremely localized, and you never know for sure exactly when it's going to break loose on the farms and properties that you hunt. You just got to be there, and you got to really hunt that November 1st to 20th period to really find that magic sweet spot. It's going to be a little different for everybody. You just never quite know. That pretty much wraps up the Southeast report. I'm going to jump into the comment sections before we go to the Northeast. We have Josh Montgomery, who is with us tonight. I'm going to see if we have any questions that we need to answer before we jump over to his region. Bear with me as I run through these comments real quick, and I'm going to take this as a reminder. Definitely drop your questions and your own rut reports in the comment section. We'll do our best to answer all the questions we come to. We'll also do our best to share your own rut reports. Travis Baker says been seeing a lot of rut action down in Lancaster, South Carolina. Let's see here. Ryan says Central New York is hot right now. Big boars are everywhere. Mr. Woodward said that he saw 3 mature deer tonight in Virginia, so they're on their feet. Anthony says that he killed a big 6 in Madison County, Virginia today, but they are not rutting quite yet where he is. Let's see if we have any more reports and questions. Adam says he reports some chasing activity in West Virginia. Philip says been seeing more daytime activity in mature bucks and chasing for little bucks in Hickory County, Missouri. Rusty says, for the Northeast report, bucks chasing does. Trail cams are useless for me. Bucks chasing does in and out of cornfields. Yeah, standing corn can be a challenge. Michael Warren said he saw 2 giants here within the last couple of days. Think that's pretty much all of our reports. We're going to jump over to the Northeast and get our resident Yankee. How you doing, Josh?
Good. Seems to be working this week.
Yeah, we're back in action. I think, actually, to be honest, without, I'm not just laying blame or making excuses, but I think the issue was on Facebook Live Facebook last week. I believe they were having some issues with Facebook Live that was basically preventing people from joining at times. So it's just kind of hit and miss. But no, we're back. We're at it, and we're as big and as bad as ever, I guess you might say. So tell us what's happening up there in the Northeast, Mr. Montgomery.
Well, for me at least, here in Maryland, it's kind of like you said a few minutes ago. It wasn't quite like I was hoping it was going to be this past weekend. I was in the woods for about 4 days, hunted all weekend and into Monday and Tuesday, and it seemed, the little bucks are getting all fired up and cruising around and chasing some, but I didn't have any luck with catching up with any of my older mature bucks. I did have 2 show up on camera, which were in daylight, but within the last, 6 or 7 days, that was maybe 2 days. Each one showed up basically within, the 5 or 6 day period, like once. So it's been, I was hoping to be a little better.
Any different. Right. That, and that's good that they were in daylight. I've had much the same. There's, I don't have any giant deer on camera right now that I'm personally hunting, but the deer that I've been targeting for the last few days, he is, just a solid mid-40s 9, and he's only made 2 trail camera daylight appearances. It's just that's really no different than an October cold front.
Pretty much.
So it's not been great. It's not been what I expected it to be for the first 6 days of November, but that just means it might break loose just a tad later. I think since it really hasn't cut loose yet, I really think that it has to break within the next couple of days. It has to.
I'm thinking and hoping again that it's right around this weekend, because that's when I'll be back in the woods. But
I hope they hold off for you.
Yeah, it seems that the further we go north, the better. They're getting a little better action up in New York area. I talked with Anthony Verga, Realtree Pro staffer, and he got lucky and filled a buck tag this weekend on a buck he was chasing there in I guess where part is that? South Central New York and in Steuben County. He actually gave me reports for northern New Jersey where he spends time and New York there. But just in New York, he's had great deer action over the weekend. And like I said, he was able to put a tag on his target buck he was actually after that was chasing a doe late in the morning. So he's seeing some chasing there, obviously. And all this pretty much increased right after that front we had come in, I guess was probably for most people after Friday and into the weekend. But again, definitely buck activity picked up, seeing more seeking, chasing has increased with the older bucks showing more in daylight. Rubs and scrapes are still popping up, and most scrapes are visible at this point around the food sources. And he definitely made a point of, he's seen some bucks, several different bucks cruising in, check the food source, and then check right back out. Obviously, they're looking for that hot doe, and just wasn't there yet. And the aggression has picked up as well. Seeing more fights, it's getting a little more intense. The last couple we've seen, and that's for New York and northern New Jersey. What is this? With the front that moved through, we got some pretty windy days there, and he thinks it knocked down at least a good amount of the remaining acorns, which deer seem to be jumping back on some feeding patterns on some acorns. Scrape activity has slowed a little bit there in that part of New Jersey. Younger bucks have definitely been feeling it and been out cruising and chasing. And activity's been good uh, between 8 and 10 a.m. late in the mornings and the last about hour or so of the afternoons. And obviously we have some more colder weather moving in this weekend and into next week. And Anthony definitely expects the hunting to be great. So it's a good time to be in the woods.
Yeah, it's the same here in the southeast. Basically, the weather is forecast. Of course, our modern gun opens this weekend here in Kentucky. There are some other gun seasons that's going to be opening up as well. And the weather couldn't be hitting any more perfect. We're going to be having temperatures down in the 20s for the low for the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And it's going to be even down into the teens early next week. So it sounds like the weather's going to be hitting just right for the weekend up there for you guys. It's going to be hitting just right here. I failed to mention that during the Southeast report. I was too focused on rut activity and didn't talk about the weather. But the weather is going to be really good here for the weekend in the Southeast as well. Bucks should be moving. Again, I've not seen that frenzy of action that I typically see. I've hunted the last 3 afternoons. I haven't been able to get out much of the morning because I've been working, but I've hunted every afternoon this week. And 3 nights ago, I saw a buck out in the field with the does. Didn't really actually, touch them or push them that much. It's been the same the last 2 nights as well.
Definitely, and I feel like the mornings were definitely better for me the last couple of days. They had, I mean, obviously I didn't see any older bucks, but seen a bunch of does and younger bucks. I didn't see, I don't think any does that weren't being at least followed or bumped around by a younger buck. Seen a couple 2-year-olds, but and then later in the mornings I had 2 or 3 every morning that would cruise by, and then 20 minutes later here comes another one. So they're definitely moving. And I was just waiting. I'm like, all right, here comes the big one, and it just never happened. So, but like you said, it's definitely going to get colder here, and I'm sure the further north you go, it's just going to get even colder. So I think we're Friday into Saturday, the highs are only in the 40s, and definitely lows, I think, in the 20s. And like I said, it's probably colder the more north you go. But I'm going to jump right over into, let me see here, southeastern Pennsylvania. I spoke with Austin Beebe, and he's a Midwest Whitetail Pro staffer, and he said overall activity has picked up again with younger bucks cruising, increasing the pressure on the does and chasing a little bit. Mature bucks have increased daylight movement, but he feels it's still mostly, a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening, not quite, nothing cruising in the middle of the day or anything like that, which it seems to be real similar to what I'm seeing. Scraping is still pretty good, but with most of his deer activity close to bedding and around food sources, he did say alfalfa and winter wheat are getting hit pretty good up there. So, and then jumping up to Fairfield County in southwestern Connecticut, I spoke with Anthony DeQuiznio. He had, over the weekend, right after the front, he started some vacation time and into this week, and he said he had an explosion of deer activity with the younger bucks and older bucks moving a ton in daylight, and he actually had several friends that were able to connect and tag some good bucks, but unfortunately he didn't. Those are still feeding, hitting red oaks pretty good, and browse, and the feeding patterns still seem to be pretty good at this point. He still has found some scrapes popping up, but feels that it's kind of tapering off with the bucks, getting more towards seeking and chasing, and the scraping activity's kind of falling off, which again I feel is kind of similar to what I'm seeing. I haven't had a whole lot of scrape activity, still seeing a few here and there pop up, but overall I feel like they're just out searching at this point.
Good deal. Has anybody else shared any intel with you? Is there anything else that you can share with us from the region up there?
I think that's it.
Good deal. What is your advice for the weekend deer hunter out there who is going to be in the woods this Friday afternoon, Saturday, and Sunday, based on what you're seeing, based on what everybody else in the region is seeing as well? What's your advice, tactically speaking, for the guy or girl who's going to be getting out there and hunting here in a couple days?
I would say, I mean, I'm probably going to be, I have a good spot that's a lot of bedding. I'm probably going to get in next to some bedding, and they just got to be busting loose and searching or chasing And I mean, at this point, you just got to be in the right spot. So I'm probably going to focus on some bedding at one of my urban spots where the bigger buck is I'm chasing. And it's a good spot this time of year where just over history with trail cameras that, this from now the next week or two is when they really start showing up and cruising around. And like I said, you just never know what's going to pop up. So obviously sit as long as you can, sit all day if you can at this point, probably. I mean, obviously if you're not seeing anything, maybe, don't be afraid to get down and move to another spot. Food still seems to be pretty good. So, if you got a spot, you've been seeing a lot of deer hitting some food, definitely hit that still, obviously. And the food and the bedding. So I guess it all depends on your property at this point.
For sure. Everybody's scenario is different, and that's the thing with deer hunting. There is no black and white. There is only shades of gray when it comes to tactics. Outside of legalities, follow your laws. But whenever laws and ethics aside, there are nothing. There is no black and white, only shades of gray. So, my advice for all the deer hunters out there who's going to be hunting this weekend: read your situation, do what works for you. If you have a lot of history with a property, basically take what we say with a grain of salt. We basically gather this information and relay it, but take that with a grain of salt, mix it in with what works for you and what you typically see and what you're seeing now, and then make a decision on what to do and where to hunt.
Definitely. I have two different spots, and they couldn't be more different. One has not any bedding, and the other spot it's almost all bedding. And this time of year, they're totally different. One almost gets vacant with deer activity. You get lucky once in a while, but the other, it's like you could just sit there all day and they're in and out, in and out. So definitely every property's different. So
for sure. All right. Well, thanks, Josh. If there's nothing else that you can share with us, we'll touch base with you next Wednesday night.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
Thank you, and good luck this weekend.
You too.
All right, solid report from our resident Northeastern reporter. We're going to jump into the comments here, and then we're going to go over to our Midwest reporter, Tyler Ridenauer. Let's see if we have any reports or any questions. Let's see here. Let's scroll back up to where I where I left off earlier. Adam says he's seen 8 dead deer today on the sides of the road in Kentucky. A couple of them were bucks. Paul says expect things to really pick up after this, the next couple of days here after the full moon. Michael says he's been seeing a lot of deer killed on Highway 35 south of Angleton, Texas. Let's see here. Nicholas is asking what were the dates for Virginia. Virginia is much like Kentucky and really Tennessee in a lot of ways. Virginia, for the most part, sees a November rut, a mid-November rut. I don't have any specific dates for for you, Nicholas. But basically, for the bulk of Virginia, with the exception of maybe the far southeastern counties, the bulk of Virginia sees a rut that peaks around November 15th as far as the actual breeding goes. It's much the same as Kentucky, West Virginia, and some other kind of mid-south and mid-Atlantic states. Dylan says in upstate New York, young bucks responding well to doe bleats and young buck grunts. Says, have had a few guys at work say they've seen good bucks chasing, but none of the mature bucks chasing yet. Tons of scrapes and rubs showing up as well. Let's see here. Bobby says, scrapes have been worked by does for 3 weeks. Big bucks looking midday, hitting the horns and tending grunts followed by doe bleats in northern Missouri there. Let's see here. A lot of people are mentioning that there's going to be really good weather for their neck of the woods this weekend. That's going to be the case for a lot of hunters, especially in the eastern half of the country and especially the northeast section of the country, even as far south as Kentucky and Tennessee. I think that pretty much, we got one more here. Richard says, Central New York, younger bucks are on their feet cruising, still waiting on the big boys to start up. I think that pretty well rolls through our reports and questions. We're going to see if we can't get Tyler Ridenauer, our Midwest rut reporter, on to see what he's up to.
Hey Josh,
How you doing, Tyler?
good. How are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty good, but not as good as you are today.
Yeah, I had a pretty good afternoon. I'm out in Kansas, actually.
Tell us about it.
Yes, make a trip out here every year in November, and well, it didn't last long this year. It was actually my first day hunting, and shot a pretty good 10 tonight. This afternoon, about 3 o'clock. So pretty happy. A little bit sad to tag out the first
Absolutely.
day, but my brother and dad and some buddies are coming out, so I'll get in the tree with them here. Miss out on all the fun.
There you go. Now you just get to enjoy the true special parts of deer camp, and you can go sit in the woods with them.
Yep, exactly. Pressure's off. So, yep, had a quick
Absolutely.
hunt, but pretty good deer. Probably mid-40s, type 10, older, 4.5, 5.5-year-old buck. So, he came
Very
in.
cool. Congratulations.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, he come in. I said right at just about exactly 3 o'clock, and just hanging with a doe. Not chasing her hard. She'd feed. She'd get 100 yards from him, and he'd take his time, mosey on up, and just hang close by. And saw another about 150-inch 10 this morning, doing something real similar. And Midwest as a whole, we're not seeing, like you've been saying, not seeing crazy chasing. It's not full blown chasing hard, 4 or 5 bucks in a string after a doe yet. There have been reports here and there. There's pockets where they have had really good activity. Like you said, you had pretty good luck in Ohio, seeing good chasing activity there. There's been pockets there where it's been good. Indiana, getting pretty good reports. Certain areas there, they've had little peaks in activity. Iowa, same deal. But most of the Midwest, as a whole, bucks are cruising, looking for those first does. We're obviously, there are a few reports here and there. There's a few does that are going to come in early. Fewer scatter reports from guys that have seen an older buck locked down with a doe, but that's going to be pretty rare. Um, but I think we're a few days from things really getting good. Weather-wise, parts of the Midwest are going to have really cold weather this weekend. Where I'm at here in Kansas, it's supposed to be 76 on Saturday, so a little less than ideal. But by Monday, it's supposed to be high, I think barely in the 30s. So by early next week, everybody across the Midwest is going to have great conditions, and I think you can say for sure by Monday or Tuesday, it should be absolutely on fire anywhere in the Midwest that you're at.
And it seems like it might just be a touch later this year than it was this time last year, as far as and again, it really doesn't change much from year to year because it's pretty much fixed, as you know, as I know, as most of our deer hunters out there listening know. It's a fixed rut for the northern half of the country. It doesn't really change. Now, how much we see of that during daylight hours does change from year to year. But it can still be a little bit off, plus or minus 2 or 3 days, and I think we're minus 3 days this year.
Right. Yeah, you're talking a few days. Yeah, it's a little bit of wiggle room, but yeah, no big swings. It's pretty consistent year to year, and yeah, that's what we're seeing across the board. One thing to note, evening activity has been pretty good with the moon phase that we've got right now. I killed that buck at 3 o'clock today. Talked to Clint Swatch with B3 Archery. He's in West Central Missouri, and he killed a buck on the 3rd. Real nice buck, older deer, and killed him at 3:45. So that mid to late afternoon has been pretty good from several people I've talked to, and that's just 2 cases there within the last couple of days. Older deer on the.
It's not been terrible.
No.
Yeah, I've watched a mature buck the last 3 afternoons. Today's Wednesday. Monday afternoon, I watched a deer probably 500 yards out. He wasn't really bumping, chasing does, but he was kind of looking at them, kind of starting to get interested, and it was a solid 4.5-year-old deer. Yesterday afternoon, I had another 4.5-year-old deer come out, but I watched him make 2 rubs, watched him tend to scrape, but he really wasn't doing anything as far as the does go. And then tonight, I had another 3.5, maybe 4.5-year-old deer come out, and he come into a pond. and he was just thirsty. He didn't care about the ladies. He looked over at a doe, and that was it. That was all. That was really all he. That's all it wrote. No rut activity, no chasing. Didn't go over to just to give her a sniff. That was it. He just wanted to come to the pond and drink. And it's been warm for the last few days here in Kentucky, with highs in the 60s in some tomorrow. So for those of you dealing with warm weather right now, don't shy away from a water source during the rut anytime, but especially on warmer days during the rut.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good tip for sure. Let's see.
What's your other sources telling you?
I talked to Clint McCoy. He's the state deer biologist for Ohio, and said that same, similar to what you've seen. I know when you were hunting down there a few days ago, they've had a few pockets where they've had pretty good chasing, but overall, he said they're on track, for that November 15th, bulk of conception. So it's getting ready to get good down there, and I think there's pockets where where you could see a frenzy of activity really at any moment in the next couple of days, and that's going to be the case almost anywhere. So in my home state of Michigan, starting to cruise really good, and they are getting a few reports of a little bit of chase in there. A few older bucks on their feet. Our age structure is pretty skewed, so it's hard to speak to older age class bucks. There's not many to observe, but there are some older deer starting to hit their, get on their feet and move later in the morning and early in the afternoon. So I haven't heard of a lot of true midday movement with older deer, but definitely getting closer to midday.
Yeah.
One other thing to touch on is does and fawns. We're still seeing a ton of does with fawns here. Yesterday covered a lot of ground, getting stands hung and everything, and big groups of does, still feeding in the afternoons, and a lot of does hanging with them. Starting to see a few lone fawns here and there, but for the most part, that's always a sure tell sign, and a lot of them still hanging tight to mama. So, but I would, like we said, next couple days, I would expect that to start changing.
And hopefully with this really good weather that's going to be hitting by Friday and Saturday for some and Saturday and Sunday for others, hopefully the weather is going to be lining up perfectly with that really good chasing activity that we all love to see. I think we're going to hit it just right this year. Yep. As far as that goes.
Yep, should definitely be good. Yep. As far as tactics right now, rattling hasn't been super effective from a lot of guys that I've talked to, but grunting and doe bleats have been really effective. So if you're in the woods the next couple of days, might be something to keep in mind. If you've got a buck hung up and trying to coax them into range, maybe reach for the grunt call over the antlers to start with.
Good deal. Good deal. Solid advice. Anything else that you can share from your sources?
No, that covers most everything for tonight. Yeah, I mean it's time to be in the woods, man. It's it can happen at any time. We haven't seen that big spike in activity yet, but depending on where you're at, it could happen at any moment. So it's November. You got to love it. So
you've already shared a lot of great tips for everybody out there, but what's one more nugget of advice that you could give our weekend warriors who's going to be getting out Friday afternoon, Saturday and Sunday there in the Midwest region? What's your just absolute best tip, surefire advice for our guys and girls who's going to be hitting it here in a day or two?
And they're going to grab those first does here in the next few days by the weekend or tail end of the weekend. And downwind side of bedding areas in the mornings is one of my absolute favorite tactics. And if you're trying to kill a really big deer, if you've got any history with the place you're hunting, wherever the thickest, nastiest cover is, they're going to push those does in there when they lock down, and they can be tough to hunt, those types of places, because you may not see a lot of deer activity. But if you're trying to kill a really big deer, those are the types of places where middle of the day, a true giant can push a doe into those places. That's where he's going to hold her and breed her at.
Good deal. That's solid advice. Great information. I would say good luck to you this weekend, but you don't need it. You've already filled your tag this afternoon. So congratulations instead.
Thanks.
We look forward to checking back in with you next Wednesday night.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you, and good luck to you and everybody else out there.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yep.
All right, solid advice from our resident Midwest reporter. We may be trying to get Mr. Bill Winke on here in a minute. I think he's going to be joining us. I see that he's watching He is on the report, but I'm not able to send him an invite for some reason. Let's check back here and see if we can. Yeah, I'm not able to send Bill an invitation right now. I'm not sure why. Hold on one second. Maybe, let's see here. Yeah, I'm not able to send an invitation just yet. We may swing over to the Northwest region and then circle back. I think we have Mr. Patrick Mayteen ready to go. We may go to Mr. Mayteen here for a moment, get the Northwest report, and then try again with Mr. Winky. I know he's itching to jump on here with you guys. He killed an absolute giant a few days ago, just an absolute Iowa stud. So he has some great stories to tell. Obviously, I'm sure he'll have excellent update information for his neck of the woods up there in Iowa. But we'll try to send him an invitation here momentarily. For now, we're going to run over to the Northwest region and see if we can't get Mr. Mayteen on to tell us what's happening up there in the far Northwest. How you doing, Mr. Mayteen?
Very good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. We were going to try to get Mr. Winky on there between the Midwest and Northwest report, but I was not able to send him for some reason. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the Northwest report, then we'll probably kick you off for a moment, see if we can't get Mr. Winky back on, and then follow up with the Southwest. How's that sound?
Yeah, I sometimes have to turn my phone completely off and reboot it to get back on, so might try that.
Yep. Sometimes, this technology thing, it can be difficult. It can give us fits. We had some trouble last week trying to get some people on. It turns out that was Facebook's problem, not ours. A lot of times that's the case whenever issues like this happen. It's just a Facebook glitch and nothing that we can control. Tell us, what's happening up there in the Northwest region?
So things are really starting to happen here. I've got a new spot in Washington. I put some cameras out maybe 3 weeks ago, and just got to them late last week, and then saw enough action that I ran back Monday to because when I threw the cameras out, it's a small piece of property. It's not I didn't think it was a great spot, but it turns out it's pretty decent. But I threw some commercial prepared deer food stuff out in front of my cameras, and when we had that snow and that real cold snap down into the teens, they really moved really well. So when I went back over it didn't take a lot of stuff with me, just took a couple more packages of that bait. But when I saw, the action that I had, I ran back Monday and threw some corn out. But definitely, at those spots that I have set up are being hit by the 2.5 and 3 year olds really hard. They're coming in broad daylight, and a lot of does, which is very good. This time of year, some people get discouraged. They tell me, oh, all I have at my stand are a bunch of does. Well, right now, that's a good thing. So, I'm encouraged by that. I have a lot of does and a lot of 3.5 year old, 4x4, a little 120, 125 8 points. So, very encouraging. The thing that really surprised me, though, is I'm getting, like, on a weekly basis, a lot of new arrivals, 4.5+ year old bucks. And what kind of surprised me is I'm getting like one a week daytime appearances from those big mature bucks. So they're definitely sniffing around, and things are starting to happen. I'm seeing more scrapes over there, and archery season in Washington doesn't open until about mid-November. So it looks like it's right on schedule, over there. So I'm really looking forward to that. Idaho, I've got 2 spots in Idaho that I hunt, down here where I live and then up at higher altitude, and probably about 1,000 to 1,500 foot elevation difference in my higher spot and down where I live. And I'd kind of started getting worried. I wasn't seeing a lot of scrapes down here lower where I live, not on schedule with last year in particular, but that's busted open. I'm seeing fresh scrapes. I'm seeing really big, nice, aggressive scrapes. and some new spots, interestingly. Some of the old spots, I guess the branches have kind of sagged. They don't like them anymore, but the scrapes high and low are being worked. It looks like almost daily. The rub lines are extending. I'm finding rubs in new places. And, you know, doing all that driving between here and Washington spots about 4 hours away, doing all that driving, seeing a lot of does and young bucks. And by young bucks, I mean spikes, fork horns, little 6 points and stuff like that throughout the day. I mean, all day long. The does and the smaller bucks are moving for sure. You know, on cameras here in Idaho, the 3-year-olds are definitely showing up in the daylight. Again, you know, we all get kind of wrapped up in this whole trophy thing. I mean, if you just want to kill a buck, I mean, I'd get in a stand this weekend. This 3.5-year-old, you know, 120, 125, 8 points are showing up on regular basis. Again, down here as well, the 4.5-year-old plus bucks they're showing up real sporadically. They're showing up a lot at night. I've got a couple spots where I've got just like clockwork every night movement from big bucks. And but I've been kind of surprised. I've had a couple of really nice older bucks. I mean, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5-year-old bucks showing up in midday, but it's very sporadic right now. Not something you can really count on. And all those big mature bucks have all been solo, whereas some of the smaller bucks are kind of mixing with the does. And something kind of interesting, something to do with the moon or whatever. The morning, nothing but does and the youngest bucks. All the bucks, the 3.5-year-olds, are showing up in the afternoon. So, you know, something to keep in mind. It's just maybe something that's going on with the weather right now. It's not super cold. It's nice and chilly. It's especially cold in the morning. I'm surprised those big mature bucks aren't moving better in the morning, but evening movement seems to be the rule right now. So that Montana, I talked to Mike Ellig, who has black gold sights, and he hunts east of Bozeman, and usually pretty successful whitetail hunter. He's pretty serious about it. And he said this week he watched a mature buck make a scrape. So he said that's evidence that it's not just the young guys who are working those scrapes. You know, some of the mature bucks are starting to hit the scrapes good. He hasn't seen any chasing yet. I don't know, but he said he did note that the does are getting really antsy, kind of nervous and antsy, watching over their shoulders. So he believes things are just about to break wide open any day now. So this weekend should be prime over in Montana. Now, talking to my buddy Tom Tabor, who's an outdoor writer who lives over in the Hamilton area, he had a mule deer tag and shot a really nice buck apparently, but he said he's seeing a lot of the mule deer have gathered harems and are tending them and very attentive and you know, they're on their does. They're not letting them out of their sights. He's also seen a couple of really big battles, you know, bucks trying to kill each other. So sounds like they're really rutting over there. And, you know, I have to think that anything that's going on with the mule deer is pretty much going to correlate to the whitetail down in the river bottoms in that part of the world. Hamilton and on over to down I've gone blank, but the Bitterroot River Valley. You know, there's a lot of whitetails down in there. So, you know, since he's seeing the mule deer, you know, fighting hard and tending does, I have to think that the whitetails have slipped into the rut as well. And now moving down to Wyoming, talking to Dustin DeCrew from Bighorn Outfitters, said the weather's been kind of warm for that part of the world. I mean, we're not talking like hot, but it's kind of warm for that kind of part of the world. Kind of suppressed the movement, but he says that's not out of the ordinary for this time of year. He said festivities really kick off about the 10th of November. So he said the scrapes are being hit, the rubs are appearing. Things look to be on schedule for that November 10 kickoff. So he says that a lot of big bucks this year expects it to be a very good season.
Good deal. Do you have any other information from your sources up there in the Northwest?
Just overall in the Northwest right now, I mean, Montana, for sure, I'd be in a stand this weekend. Washington, Idaho, if you have time, I would spend it in a stand this weekend. I mean, if you have other things going or you have to work or whatever, I wouldn't get too panicked yet. You know, it's going to just get better, but it's definitely starting. I mean, if I have had time even during the week, I would be in a stand in Washington and Idaho. There's definitely some big bucks moving. It's just very sporadic, but you never know. You could get lucky. Um, Montana's definitely happening. Wyoming sounds like they're kind of on the same schedule we are. So same deal out there. Kind of if you have something that's pressing this weekend in Wyoming, I mean, you might hold off. It's only going to get better.
Good deal. Awesome information. Tactically speaking, you've already shared some really good advice, but you know, for the guys and girls that's going to get out there this weekend and enjoy the great outdoors, what should they do? You've already shared some tactics already, but what should they focus on? Obviously, you said there it seems like the central theme is still definitely in the pre-rut. What's that go-to stand location if they have it available on the property that they hunt? What type of terrain, what type of tactics should they focus on?
Well, I know that there is some chance of rain in the forecast in the coming week, maybe like Sunday or Monday. And, you know, if you have a really hot scrape, you know, one of those big signboard scrapes that's getting hit by a lot of deer, I would keep an eye on those this weekend. If you have a remote spot where they're free to move in the daylight and not totally nocturnal, that I would concentrate on. I haven't had a lot of luck in the Northwest calling for whatever reason, but I definitely wouldn't shy away from trying some antler tickling because these bucks are going to be sorting their pecking orders. And that's another thing this time of year. I set my cameras up on video this time of year. I just seem to get a little more information, gives me a little more insight into what's going on. And I have noticed a lot of these 3.5-year-old bucks are nosing these does pretty hard. The does are not receptive at all. I mean, they're running away scared, but they're definitely looking. So if you have a spot that you've been monitoring that has a lot of does, I would check that spot out too. That those bucks are gonna start nosing around, checking things out. And also, I should add too, a lot of the scrape things. I've had a lot better luck on, especially like the edges of clear cuts or farm fields or something, setting my stand up about 50 to 100 yards downwind, kind of according to the terrain and vegetation. And a lot of those bucks will just cruise by and just scent check those scrapes and not really go into them right on site. So that's another thing that works really well for me, is getting downwind of the scrapes proper instead of sitting right over the top of them.
Good deal. We are going to transition over into the Southwest report and just move forward as normal. Tell us what's happening in the southwestern corner of the country.
Now, Texas is interesting. Texas is all over the place, depending on region. Talk to my buddy Dwayne Purse, who farms, and he's old-time bow hunting buddy. He lives in north central Texas over by Wichita Falls. He says that the mature bucks are definitely showing up on cameras, but oldest bucks, the most, you know, the 4.5+ year old bucks are showing up mostly at night, almost entirely nocturnal actually. But they are moving closer to daylight. They're edging towards legal shooting hours. But he predicts, you know, just from living there most of his life, he says 8 to 10 days out before they really get to rolling there. Now, you move about 4 hours to the south, maybe a little higher altitude there. I mean, Texas doesn't have huge altitude, but I mean a little higher and a little cooler maybe. My good buddy Stephen Tisdale, who I'll be hunting with in December, he says they're just fired up there. He said he's seen some chasing. He went out this weekend, did some rattling. He set up 3 times, called in 2 mature bucks. So they're definitely sorting things out. He says he doesn't believe the does are really receptive yet. Seen the does are basically running away from the bucks who are trying to nose them, but they're definitely coming into rattling horns really well. Definitely cruising widely. A little bit sporadic at the feeders. Again, kind of like the scrape thing, you might want to set up a little ways downwind instead of right over the top of it, if that's possible with the cover you have there. But they're not really coming in and eating. They're just cruising through and checking for does. Now, my buddy Ronnie Parsons, he's on the northern part of the Edwards Plateau, I guess kind of the northern edge of the hill country, you could call it. And he has observed some young bucks are chasing for sure, but he said the mature bucks are just not moving at all. Either the older bucks, the mature bucks have completely abandoned the feeders. The bachelor groups have definitely broken up. They're not tolerating each other at all. But sounds like he's seeing plenty of 3.5-year-olds, just not those 5.5. The big bucks are just not moving that well yet. Now you move down into the heart of hill country. Good buddy Razor Dobbs, he has Outdoors Alive television, and he lives at Kerrville. They had some cool weather last week, and he said he saw some really aggressive chasing. So, you know, his opinion was that the rut was going. But he said that there are a ton of acorns this year, and it really affected the movement, just not seeing as many deer as he normally does. And that down that part of the world, I mean, it's not mott's like it is further north. It's there's solid area, so it's pretty hard to pinpoint them down. Now Kyle Bearfield, he's a Realtree pro staffer and host of All Things Hunting Television. He hunts 70 miles west of Austin, Texas. And he said he's seen some fully mature bucks chasing during the week. He said the rut is wide open there. So that, you know, again, like I said, it's all over the place. South Texas, Mike Stroff, who has a couple outfitting businesses there. He's a host of Savage Outdoors. He's got one ranch is in Ozona, which is kind of the southern part of Edwards Plateau. He's got another place in Uvalde, which is kind of the northern part of deep South Texas. And he said it's just been really slow. He said it continues to be slow. Definitely some scraping and rubbing starting, but the big mature buck have been very, very inconsistent on the food. Just kind of hit and miss right now, but it'll only get better. And then moving over to East Texas, talked to a buddy of mine, Matt Further, I never can pronounce his name correctly. Further, I think, and he's got veteran innovative products. And over in East Texas, he says bucks are chasing does aggressively. He says the rut's in full swing. So Texas is kind of, like I said, all over the place. It just really depends on the particular region that you're hunting. So I hope I got quite a variety of areas there. I hope that helps some people out. But
for sure, absolutely. Great, solid information, and definitely shows the scope and the range of the Texas rut. Just like much of the Southeast, it's a hodgepodge. You know, it's on here, not over there. So thank you for that. Thank you for getting all those great sources. That way we have a pretty good sample throughout the state of Texas, which is a big, big state, and is honestly could be a region, you know, considered a region itself. So solid information. What's your guys and gals up in Oklahoma telling you?
Oklahoma, talked to Jeff Danker from Buck Ventures Television. He's also a Realtree pro staffer. He said the bucks are moving really well right now. He said they are not rutting that he can tell, but he says they're moving real well, seem to be charging up, getting ready for the rut. But what's interesting, he says they have seen some bucks with broken tines already. So, you know, again, they're sorting those pecking orders. So, which tells me this weekend would be a really good weekend to do some rattling in Oklahoma. And he's in northwestern Oklahoma. My other Oklahoma people weren't in the field this week, so I didn't get any reports from western and northeastern. But my guess would be that's going to be pretty much the story. Sounded like northeast last time I talked to Eddie Claypool that things were kicking off pretty well there. And I know that when I talked to Joni Sanderford from Croton Creek Ranch, that last week they were seeing some swelled necks and the young bucks were chasing. So I'm betting this weekend's going to be really good all across Oklahoma. Colorado, I finally caught up with Fred Eichler today. He's out guiding, but I caught him when they were gutting an animal, so got to talk to him briefly. But said the bucks are definitely chasing. The rut is in full swing on the eastern plains. He's between Trinidad and Pueblo area out on the plains, so kind of the southern part of Colorado's eastern plains. So if they're rutting hard down there, they're definitely going to be rutting hard up farther north, east of Denver and Loveland and that area. So and both seasons open. This is going to be a great weekend in Colorado. If you're lucky enough to have a place to hunt out there, it's getting harder. The outfitters have leased up a lot of those ranches out there, but there is some public land. Eastern Colorado is going to be wide open this weekend. It's going to be fantastic. New Mexico, they have some rifle seasons going on right now. The only information I could get, because most of my outfitter buddies down there are out in the field hunting, and there's no cell service in New Mexico. But I did catch Ralph Ramos, who has Ramos Hunts and Video, and he's been hunting mule deer all week. But he said the mature bucks are still in bachelor groups. He said it's pretty warm, so the best hunting's been very early, very late. Right the crepuscular hours, but pretty much anything that he's observing with the mule deer going to carry over to the Coues deer as well. They're still in bachelor groups, but they are moving well. That's the good news. So rifle hunters get a good perch and where you can see a lot of country and sit down and do some glassing. I mean, deer are moving, and hunting's been good. And he also mentioned, like everyone has been saying in the Southwest, trophy quality's been fantastic this year because of all of the early moisture they got. Over in Arizona, they're kind of between seasons right now. There's going to be some seasons starting in about a week. Darren Choate, who has Western Whitetails website, hoping for that because it's been very, very dry down there, and they need some rain now. It hadn't rained substantially since September, so they really need it. He hunted last week. He said all the Coues bucks that he saw are still in bachelor groups for sure. Small bachelor groups, which is pretty typical of Coues. They don't get into big bachelor groups, but good movement throughout the day. And that's pretty typical of Coues this time of day. And that's why I say find a good vantage, sit down and stay there, because those bucks are up and down, up and down. And really what happens with some of those bucks is that first morning daylight that hits those ridge tops and stuff, you really want to glass hard because they're kind of cold natured. When that first sun comes up in the morning and hits them, they'll get up and they'll move to that sun to warm up. They'll feed for a little while and then they'll go bed. But as the sun moves, they're going to get out of those beds and shift. So you're going to get movement throughout the day. So if you've done your scouting, there's a lot of sign, there's deer there. Just find that good vantage, plant yourself, and just look and look and look, because they're very territorial. They're going to be there,
Absolutely. As far as the men and women that's going to be hunting there in the Southwest, there's a very diverse range of rut activity right now, or the lack thereof. For the areas that are seeing pretty good rut action, and that will be seeing pretty good rut activity through the weekend, what is your advice for those pockets of the Southwest? What should those deer hunters do, tactically speaking?
Well, I'd say Texas for sure. If you're seeing rut activity, if your deer in your particular area are rutting, I would definitely be out there rattling. Kind of like coyote columns, start off soft and then increase the volume a little bit as time goes by. Try some of the antler tickling for the first 10 or 15 minutes, and if you're not getting a response, then go ahead and open it up and see what happens. Reach a little farther, maybe get a more aggressive buck to come in. But definitely right now, certain parts of Texas, that rattling and aggressive grunting is really going to pay off. Other parts not so much, of course, because like north central and sounds like South Texas for sure just isn't going yet. So if you get into that warm weather down in South Texas, water is always good. North Texas, it sounds like we're about the same point we are here in the Northwest. Is it just kind of wait and see thing? You go ahead and sit this weekend, you might get lucky because there are deer moving. just very sporadically right now. But, 8 to 10 days out, things will break wide open if you're saving up vacation time or just have things to do around the house. And then, in the Southwest proper, New Mexico, Arizona, if you have hunts there, I mean, I always tell people, you've got to sit on, you got to find a good vantage. You've got to sit and you've got to glass, because people they'll glass for a half hour and then they want to go see what's over the hill, or they just, think that whoever covers the most ground is going to see the most deer. And especially with Coues deer, they're spooky. They're very elusive. You really need to just plant yourself and just glass. When I hunted Coues deer a lot when I was outfitting down in that part of the world, I even owned 15 by 60 Zeiss and put them on a tripod. That's how tedious the glassing can get. And sometimes you're glassing hillsides that are a mile away. But it just, those deer are very well camouflaged. They're very small, and especially midday, all they're going to do is get up and shift to a new bed. You might have a 10-minute window. So, you just got to stay on that glass, and even glass and shifts. If you have a buddy with you, your eyes get tired, let him glass for a while and take a nap and then switch off. So, but rattling in Texas in certain parts and glassing, the rest of the Southwest is what I would advise. And rattling in Oklahoma as well, I would recommend. And I know Colorado, a lot of that Eastern Plains, I used to hunt it a lot when I lived in New Mexico and could just run up there real quick. Some of that Eastern Plains gets pretty hard to stalk. I mean, it's all hands and knees, a lot of sand spurs. It can get pretty tough. But I know that when I hunted out there, those deer respond very well to rattling, grunting. Decoys work really well. The fold up flat type decoys work. Stalk in about 200 or 300 yards and then flip that thing up and give them a little grunt to get their attention. I've had deer run in from half a mile away, so because they can see out there in those plains.
Sure. Any last words for our Southwest region hunters this weekend?
Get in a stand if you have time, and if not, don't panic yet. Certain parts of Texas you definitely need to be hunting, but other parts, if you don't have time, just don't panic yet. You got time.
Very good. Well, thank you for this week's report, Patrick. As always, you knocked it out of the park for the Northwest and Southwest. We'll check back in with you next Wednesday night.
All right. Well, everyone, good luck and be safe out there, man. Wear your harnesses.
Absolutely, for sure. If the listeners out there don't take anything else away from the report this week, remember that hunting is fun, but it's not worth an injury or a lost life.
Exactly, and I know that from experience.
Yes, you do. Thank you for that, and we'll certainly check in with you next week, and good luck in the woods this weekend.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Thanks, Patrick. Attempt to get Mr. Winky on now. I don't know if he's going to be able to join us. We're going to try. I just don't think we're going to be able to bring him on. I've actually been talking to him behind the scenes, and he has got some snow that's hitting up there. His connection is very weak, very limited right now. So it appears that we're not going to be able to get him on. I'm going to check one more time. I cannot send him an invitation. Sometimes whenever there's a really weak connection like that, we can't get the people on as guests like we normally would if they had a little bit better connection. So I don't think we're going to be able to send him an invitation to bring him on tonight, but we'll definitely try to get him to come back on at a point whenever he's going to have a little bit better service, a little better signal. However, definitely continue to follow Bill Winky, as I'm sure a lot of you already have. Follow him on his social media accounts. Follow him on Realtree 365. You can also go to MidwestWhitetail.com and follow the story there. He's in the woods a lot, has a lot of knowledge, so you can get real-time rut advice from him on his platforms every single week, and in some instances every day. Go check out his daily blog. It's updated fairly frequently as well. There's plenty of rut intel on his social media accounts, MidwestWhitetail.com, the weekly series, as well as the daily video posts. So check those out. And also, he's already killed a 180 this year. We have the story of that buck up on the primary page, the best part, basically, of Realtree.com. you can go read his story. We've hyperlinked the hunt within that story to Realtree 365. You can go watch that hunt as well. There's loads of information in there, and there's a really, really cool nugget in his hunt. And I'm not going to spoil it, but if you guys and gals out there are having a tough season, maybe you're like me and you started the year out with a ton of just really mature deer on camera. You were seeing some really big mature deer, had some really good early season encounters, and then it all kind of fell off a cliff all of a sudden. And then you were thinking like, well, I don't know if I'm going to have a very good deer to hunt during the rut. Well, Bill Winke was in a somewhat similar circumstance, a similar scenario, and then out of the blue, a 180 that he knew well from last year showed up. So I guess I ruined it a little bit for you, but go check it out anyway. Read the story, then go follow the link. Watch the hunt. It's some pretty good stuff. And we'll definitely try to get Bill Winke on in an upcoming episode, installment of the Rut Report. That pretty much concludes tonight's reports. I am going to jump back into the comments section because I know there's been a lot of questions drop in the last few minutes, as well as some Rut updates. So I am going to jump back in to the comment section and see what we have here. As always, we share your information. We share your questions as well. Let's see here. Mark Steenbergen says he hunts in Warren County, Kentucky. That's right down the road from me. Young buck movement is picking up. Mature buck movement is still hit and miss. A lot of it is at night, he says. And then he has some other information as well, but I wasn't able to read it before the comment got away from me there. Let me scroll back up. Let's see here. Here we go. I lost his comment for a second there. He says that there's quite a bit of scrape activity that's happening right now. This cold front, in his opinion, is going to set things off. I could not agree more with you, Mr. Steenbergen. Let's see here. Kenneth, yes, Tyler has already given the Midwest report. We had that earlier. Once the video ends, it should be somewhere around that 35-40 minute mark. Ryan's asking about Ohio. Ryan, I spent this past weekend, I spent 2 or 3 days in Ohio, and the rut, it's like everywhere else. Sparks of rut activity. Again, for the northern half of the country, that peak breeding window is November 10th to 20th, with a peak somewhere around the 14th to the 16th. Up there, though, I did happen to get lucky and witness a early pocket of rut activity. Had one of our target bucks chasing a doe. It's just one of those things where you're either in it or you're not early November like that. So just stick with it. And whenever it finally breaks loose, wherever you hunt at, you want to be in a tree. But I think that peak chasing activity, based on what I'm seeing here in Kentucky right now, based on what the Northeast reporter, our Midwest reporter, is seeing, basically for this part of the country as a whole, it seems to me maybe a day or two behind what it was last year. Again, we've said it so many times before, the rut doesn't change. The rut is fixed in the northern half of the country especially, but it can be off maybe a day, maybe 2 days, plus or minus each year. And a lot of that is just how much rut activity you see in daytime hours. Deer are going to breed when they breed every single year, but how much we see of that during daylight it can vary sometimes. So you're heading up to Monroe County, Ohio tomorrow, you said in your comment, Ryan. I would expect that you're going to be hitting some really, really good deer activity here in the next couple of days. Pair that coming cold front that's sweeping the nation right now, and that should only encourage daytime action even more. So I think you're going to be hitting it just right. Let's see here. Todd Kelly says that the acorns have really been taking a toll there in central Georgia. Let's see. Wes McKee says Mideast Ohio cold front last weekend had some great chasing activity going on. That's exactly what I saw as well. Let's see if we got any more questions or reports. Steve Gullickson said that the does are still with the fawns there as well in Wisconsin. Says chasing the last couple of days, but mostly from younger bucks. Great point. A lot of the times whenever you see when you see fawns on their own, that's a pretty surefire sign that those does have kicked those fawns to the side, or the bucks have. And a lot of times, if you see lone fawns, that means that does and bucks are oftentimes locked down. So definitely, if you're still seeing a lot of does with their fawns and you're not seeing lone does or lone fawns, especially because lone does, that doesn't really mean anything. If they've lost their fawn throughout the season or back in the summer, it's hard to tell from that. But a lone fawn or fawns on their own is a surefire sign that, that bucks are locked down with does in your area. So that's a great point, Steve. Thank you for that. Paul is seeing quite a bit more activity in north central Kansas. That's good to know. I know they're experiencing some pretty good activity as based on Tyler Ridenauer's report earlier. He said that they're starting to see some pretty good action there in southwestern Kansas, but it just quite hasn't broke loose yet. I think that's the case throughout a lot of the Midwest, Northeast, and even parts of the Southeast. Yeah, Josh, you said you like the jacket. Yes, you can go to the link in the description. You can follow the Thiessens link there. They are the Rut Report sponsor. They are direct to consumer, so you can go check out this jacket and more with that link that's in the description below. Brian, yes, we did have the Midwest report already, but I'll throw it back at you. Basically, what Tyler reported was that, for the most part, it just hasn't quite cut loose yet in the Midwest, especially the southern parts and the eastern parts of the Midwest. Now, reports far Midwest, up there in the northern parts of Indiana, northern Ohio, parts of Michigan. I think we've had some reports from Iowa where it's kind of started to break loose and they're really starting to move a little bit more. But for the most part, the action is really just hasn't quite broke loose yet. This generally that November 5th to the 8th, 9th is usually the best chasing activity each year, and it really, based on what I'm seeing in Kentucky, based on what our reporter is seeing and hearing in the Midwest, that really, really, really good chasing activity that we all look forward to each year just quite hasn't cut loose yet, but it could any day. It could even break loose within the next few hours. You just never know. But it's right around the corner. And pair that with the coming cold front that's going to be hitting parts of the country this weekend. It's going to be hitting parts of the country the beginning of next week as well. But pair that coming cold front with the time of the year and the timing of just the general time frame and where we are in November right now, that should produce some really good chasing activity, I expect, by this weekend and into early next week. And then probably by the middle of next week, we're probably going to start seeing some lockdown bucks and does. And it's not impossible to see some lockdown deer already. Like I said, I know of a buck and a doe that were locked down October 30th on one of the properties that I hunt. It wasn't a big deer by any means, but it was a buck and a doe. A young buck and a doe were actually locked down, and he was actually tending her. So it's not unheard of. There's obviously does are being bred. That's not what we're saying. We've talked a lot about tonight where we think it's just around the corner. That doesn't mean does haven't been bred, because there've definitely been some does bred. But the bulk, I would say 90% of the does are bred between November 10th and November 20th. So if you're going to be heading out this weekend, I think you'll be seeing some pretty good rut activity, some really good chasing, hopefully. I think that pretty much wraps it up. Philip, thank you for that. Appreciate it. That's going to wrap up our questions and comments tonight. I'm going to check one more time here. Yep, that's going to have it for tonight. Again, our Rut Report is sponsored by Thiessens. You can go to the direct-to-consumer link in the description, and they are the Rut Report sponsor. But we've had a good report tonight. Solid information from all of our reporters in the Southeast, Northeast, Midwest, Northwest, and Southwest. To recap, in the Southeast, the rut is the hottest in the central part of the Florida Peninsula and the eastern half of the Florida Panhandle. Basically, almost the entire, except for the coastal counties, the South Carolina, just about all of the counties there are really doing pretty good right now. Seeing a lot of good chasing activity. In North Carolina, it's basically the eastern half of the state, with the exception of the coastal counties. No rut activity currently in Alabama or Mississippi. It's the southwestern corner of Louisiana that's seeing the best action for you Louisiana hunters. And Georgia is basically the southeastern half of the state, with the exception of the coastal counties. That's where the best rut activity is happening there. And then obviously when you get up into Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, we're right on the cusp of it. We're right on the edge of it. The really good chasing activity is going to break loose here within the next few days. If you haven't already spent your vacation time, definitely do so here in the next few days and into next week, because whereas it's going to be warm here, it was warm today, it's going to be warm tomorrow. Friday looks decent. Doesn't look bad because it's going to be after that front pushes through. It's going to snap off cold Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're going to have temperatures, the lows down in the teens and 20s, basically starting Friday for the next week or so, if not longer. So it's time to burn those vacation days starting Friday if you haven't already, and it's getting good. To recap the Northeast, Josh Montgomery told us that it is basically the same story there. He says that it just really hasn't cut loose yet. He was expecting the really good chasing activity to have already started, and it hasn't yet. He thinks it will be by the weekend, and it should pair up nicely with that cold front that's sweeping through. Back to the Midwest, where we just heard from Tyler a few minutes ago, he's saying the same thing. Even though there's pockets of really good rut activity that's occurring, some people are seeing some good chasing activity. By and large, the bulk of the region has not seen a ton of really good chasing or tending action just yet. So it's right around the corner again. Should pair up nicely and should sync up nicely, I should say, with this cold front that's going to be sweeping the country here this weekend and next week. Again, the Northwest, Southwest, we just heard from Patrick, so I won't recap those. But it's a great report we had this week. Solid information, solid intel. As always, make sure you are safe in the deer woods. Make sure you wear your safety harness. Be safe. Follow the laws. Be ethical. And have fun. That's what is most important. Just have fun in the deer woods. Deer hunting is fun. And oftentimes we try to make it too complicated. We try to make it bigger than it is. We try to put too much stress on the size of a deer, or put too much emphasis on that or this. Don't hunt for anyone else. Don't hunt for anyone but you. Make the decisions that make you happy. And if you see a deer that walks by your tree stand this weekend and it turns your crank, if it gets your adrenaline going, pull that trigger, because that's what hunting's about. It's about having fun. It's about filling the freezer. And if a big buck walks by you, and that's part of it for me too. That's part of deer hunting. I love to shoot big deer. That's what I enjoy doing. But it's not the only part of deer hunting. So just remember, hunt for you and make the decisions that make you happy in the deer woods. Good luck this weekend. Have a safe hunt. Have a fun hunt. And we'll check back in with you next Wednesday night.